A pregnant waitress was publicly fired in a packed restaurant. But what that arrogant manager didn't know was that years later, she'd return as the owner of the very place that humiliated her. How did she achieve this incredible revenge? And what was the family secret that changed the entire story? Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. Don't go anywhere, because this transformation story will move you to tears. Like this, if you want to know how a woman turned her greatest humiliation into her greatest triumph, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. The December afternoon of 2016 settled over Grandma's Kitchen restaurant like a silent storm preceding a devastating lightning strike. In the thriving heart of Maplewood, among classic brick walls that had witnessed centuries of human stories, the aroma of hearty beef stew mingled with the cheerful sound of classic jazz standards celebrating the holiday season. However, for Chloe Miller, 23, that afternoon would become the moment that redefined the course of her existence. Her delicate hands, marked by months of hard work, held the silver tray as she navigated through tables crowded with families laughing and sharing stories under the warm glow of antique streetlights. Her embroidered apron, with its traditional American folk patterns, strained against her 6-month pregnant belly, a silent testament to the life growing within her and the dreams she didn't yet know she was forging. "Chloe!" Mark's voice cut through the festive air like a knife. His harsh tone resonated above the cheerful murmur of conversations, causing several heads to turn towards the sound. The manager, a stout man with an unyielding gaze, stood by the cash register with an expression she knew all too well. The face of someone about to destroy something beautiful. Chloe's heart began to pound with the force of the powerful drumming her great-grandmother used to play at ancestral family gatherings. She knew, with that feminine intuition that transcends words, that her world was about to change irreversibly. "Get over here," Mark continued, his voice rising above the holiday melody flowing from the speakers. "We need to talk." Customers, feeling the tension spread like ripples in a disturbed pond, gradually lowered the volume of their conversations. Children stopped running between tables decorated with twinkling lights and red poinsettias. Even the jazz band seemed to play with less enthusiasm, as if the music itself sensed the approaching storm. Chloe walked slowly towards him, each step echoing in her ears like the chime of a funeral bell. Her dark eyes, inherited from generations of resilient women who had faced adversity with unwavering dignity, met Mark's cold gaze. In that moment, as the world seemed to move in slow motion, she didn't know she was being watched by a middle-aged man sitting at a corner table, someone who years later would change her destiny in unimaginable ways, due to an incompatibility with the professional environment. Mark's words fell like stones onto glass. "You're fired. Collect your things and leave." The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the universe itself had held its breath, waiting to see how that young pregnant woman would respond to public humiliation. The tears that formed in Chloe's eyes were not just from pain, but from a deep rage that had been dormant for too long. With trembling but determined hands, she removed the embroidered apron she had worn with pride for months. Among her personal belongings, she retrieved a worn notebook where she jotted down ancestral recipes that older customers shared during nostalgic conversations about cooks of yesteryear. It was her most prized possession, a compendium of culinary wisdom that connected generations of American women through the sacred art of feeding with love. As she collected her few belongings, her mind filled with memories of her great-grandmother, a tiny but fierce woman who had taught her that dignity is not negotiable and that the deepest crises often contain the seeds of the most extraordinary transformations. Sometimes, her great-grandmother had said, with that wisdom that only comes from living decades of joys and sorrows. The universe takes something away to make space for something much bigger. In that devastating moment, surrounded by the compassionate murmurs of customers who had come to love her for her genuine smile and dedicated service, Chloe couldn't imagine what could be bigger than the stability she had just lost. But somewhere deep within her, a seed of determination began to germinate. The man at the corner table watched as she walked away with her head held high, despite the tears streaming down her cheeks like silent rivers of pain and determination. Mr. Sterling Reed had come to the restaurant that afternoon, looking for a traditional meal. But he found something far more valuable, a woman whose dignity in the face of adversity reminded him of someone very special he had lost years ago. As she left the restaurant, Chloe felt the cold December air hit her face like a slap of reality. The holiday lights decorating the charming streets of Maplewood seemed to mock her pain, shining with a joy that brutally contrasted with the darkness that had settled in her heart. But as she walked along the cobblestone streets, unconsciously caressing her belly where her child grew, an inner voice began to whisper truths she wasn't yet ready to hear. That this apparent end was actually a beginning. That today's humiliation would become the fuel for an extraordinary transformation. And that the sweetest taste of victory is that which is born from the heart of the bitterest defeat. Destiny, that silent weaver of human stories, had set in motion a series of events that would connect lives, reveal family secrets buried for decades, and transform a young, fired waitress into a thriving entrepreneur who would come to change her community in ways even the boldest dreams couldn't have predicted. The first days of January 2017 arrived for Chloe like a sequence of endless nightmares. Each morning, waking in her small apartment that she shared with her mother in the cozy district of Old Town, reality hit her with the force of a cold wave. She was unemployed, pregnant, and facing a future that seemed as uncertain as the clouds gathering over the distant city skyline. Her mother, Eleanor, a small but resilient woman who had raised 3 children working as a seamstress after her husband left them when Chloe was 12, watched her daughter with a mix of concern and admiration. She had seen that same fire in Chloe's eyes that once burned in her own mother's, the great-grandmother whose recipes and wisdom had been passed down as sacred legacies from woman to woman. "My dear," Eleanor told her one morning while brewing strong coffee in their tiny kitchen, "the greatest difficulties come when we're about to receive the most beautiful blessings." But Chloe, sitting at the worn wooden table that had belonged to 3 generations of her family, caressed her belly while reviewing the few dollars she had left in her purse. The baby moved frequently now, as if sensing its mother's anxiety and trying to remind her she wasn't alone in this battle. The first weeks of job hunting were brutal. Every diner, coffee shop, and eatery in the historic downtown seemed to have the same rehearsed response. "We don't have any openings right now," accompanied by awkward glances at her growing belly. It was during the 3rd week of searching that she began to suspect something more than her pregnancy was hindering her opportunities. After being rejected from Maria's Kitchen, a family-run diner where she'd occasionally worked during peak seasons, the owner stopped her at the door. "Chloe," Maria murmured, glancing nervously over her shoulder before continuing. "Someone's been calling, asking about you, saying things that aren't true, but they make owners nervous." Chloe's heart sank like a stone in deep water. She didn't need to ask who was behind those calls. The image of Mark, with his cruel smile and calculating eyes, appeared in her mind like a menacing shadow. "What kind of things?" she asked, though part of her no longer wanted to hear the answer. "That you stole money? That you were irresponsible with customers who—" Maria couldn't finish the sentence. her eyes filling with tears of shame at having to repeat the lies. That night, Chloe stayed awake very late, listening to the sound of rain beating against her apartment windows. Her mind worked feverishly, trying to understand why Mark had decided not only to fire her, but also to systematically destroy her professional reputation. What had she done to deserve such cruelty? During the sleepless nights that followed, she began to recall details she had overlooked during her time at Grandma's kitchen. Whispered conversations between Mark and certain suppliers, invoices that didn't match deliveries, money disappearing from the cash register during night shifts. She had witnessed irregularities that, in her naivete, she had attributed to normal administrative errors. The second blow came during her routine medical appointment in February. Dr. Peterson, an older man with decades of experience, reviewed the ultrasounds with an expression that gradually grew more serious. "Ms. Miller," he began with that professional delicacy doctors develop to deliver difficult news. "We need to talk about your baby." The following words were lost in a distorted sound tunnel as Chloe's world began to spin. Her son would have special needs. Nothing life-threatening, the doctor explained, but conditions that would require specialized care, constant therapies, and financial resources she simply didn't have. She left the medical clinic like a sleepwalker, walking through the historic streets with no fixed destination as she processed this new reality. The baby growing inside her would not only be her son, but would also become her teacher, teaching her about unconditional love and the strength she never knew she possessed. That afternoon, she headed to the Maplewood Market, the pulsating heart of downtown's commercial life, where the aromas of fresh herbs, spices, and flowers mingled in a sensory symphony that had always comforted her. There, among the fresh produce stalls and the shouts of vendors, she found Ms. Eleanor, a spice vendor she had known during her years working in restaurants. "Child," Ms. Eleanor said, immediately noticing the sadness in her eyes, "you look like life is testing you, but look at these hands." She took Chloe's hands in hers, rough from decades of work. "These are a cook's hands, hands that work miracles with simple food." It was Ms. Eleanor who suggested she work at the Tasty Corner Diner on the other side of town, where the owner, Mr. Henderson, was known for giving opportunities to those who truly needed them. "It doesn't pay much," Ms. Eleanor admitted, "but he's an honest man who values hard work." The next day, Chloe took 3 buses to get to the Tasty Corner Diner, a modest establishment located in a working-class neighborhood where brightly colored houses lined up like cheerful soldiers defending their inhabitants' dreams. The place was small, with only 6 plastic tables and an open kitchen where the smoke from the grill created an aromatic mist that promised authentic food and fair prices. Mr. Henderson, a 60-year-old man with a bushy mustache and hands stained with honest grease, looked her up and down before smiling. "Can you make grilled cheese sandwiches?" he asked directly. "Yes, sir. And sauces. My great-grandmother taught me to make sauces that make you weep with happiness." Mr. Henderson laughed a genuine laugh that filled the small space like music. "All right, young lady. You start tomorrow. And I don't care that you're pregnant. Babies who grow up listening to the sounds of the kitchen are born with the gift of good flavor." And that night, for the first time in weeks, Chloe slept deeply. Her dreams were filled with dancing spices and sizzling grilled cheese sandwiches flying like golden butterflies. Her great-grandmother appeared in the dream, smiling as she ground herbs in a mortar and pestle that shimmered as if made of stars. "My granddaughter," she said, "your son will be your strength, and your kitchen will be your victory." Upon waking, Chloe felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It was a fragile hope, like the first flower that blooms after winter. But it was real, and grew in her chest like a small flame that refused to extinguish. Her first day at the Tasty Corner diner marked the beginning of a transformation she couldn't yet imagine. As she learned the rhythms of this new kitchen, she also began to discover talents that had been dormant for years, waiting for the perfect moment to awaken and change not only her life, but the lives of all who would be fortunate enough to taste the magic that flowed from her hands when she cooked with an open heart. March 2017 arrived in Chloe's life like an unexpected spring after a winter that seemed endless. At the Tasty Corner diner, her days began before dawn, when the neighborhood streets still slept under the silver light of streetlights and the fresh morning air carried the scent of freshly baked bread from neighboring bakeries. Her hands, which once merely served dishes prepared by others, now danced over the hot griddle as if they had found their true purpose. Mr. Henderson watched her from the corner of the kitchen with a growing smile that widened each day. "Young lady," he told her one morning as she prepared the special green sauce that had become the place's secret specialty, "you have something that can't be taught. It's as if the food talks to you." Chloe paused in her grinding of tomatillos and serrano chilies, feeling Mr. Henderson's words resonate somewhere deep in her soul. It was true. When she cooked, especially now with her son inside her, she felt an ancestral connection to generations of women who had fed their families with love, creativity, and the simplest ingredients transformed into culinary miracles. The first sign of her emerging talent came when she decided to experiment with the traditional grilled cheese recipe. Instead of simply using cheddar cheese, she began combining different varieties with fresh herbs she bought at the market, creating blends that surprised and delighted regular customers. "What do you put in these grilled cheeses?" asked Ms. Helen, a 70-year-old customer who had been eating there for decades. "They taste like my grandma made them, but with something new, something special." Chloe's answer came from a place she didn't know existed. "I put the love my son is teaching me from inside, and the secrets my great-grandmother whispers to me when I cook." Ms. Helen smiled with tears in her eyes. "That's how you should cook, dear, with your heart and with respect for those who came before." During April, the reputation of Chloe's food began to spread through the neighborhood like ripples in a pond. Construction workers arrived early to secure her special grilled cheese sandwiches. Mothers stopped by after dropping their children off at school to pick up tacos that tasted like my mom made them, but better. Mr. Henderson, who had struggled for years to keep his small business afloat, began to see lines forming outside his establishment for the first time in decades. "Chloe," he confessed one afternoon as they counted the day's earnings, "I think you brought a blessing to this place." But not everything was celebration in Chloe's life. As her pregnancy advanced towards the 7th month, the physical challenges intensified. There were days when her feet swelled so much she could barely stand, and occasional morning sickness forced her to rush to the small restaurant bathroom. During one of these difficult mornings, as she fought a wave of dizziness that made her lean against the wall, Mr. Henderson approached with a chair. "Sit down, young lady. The sauce can wait." "No, Mr. Henderson, I can keep going." "Listen to me closely." His voice took on a paternal tone she hadn't heard since her father left home years ago. "A pregnant woman who cooks with love is a treasure, but a hurt treasure serves no one. Take care of yourself." That afternoon, as she walked home taking the bus that snaked through the hills of Maplewood, Chloe reflected on the extraordinary changes that had occurred in her life over the past few months. The humiliating dismissal that had seemed like the end of the world was revealing itself as the catalyst for an awakening that never would have happened if she had remained comfortable in her previous job. Her cell phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. "Hi, Chloe. This is Sarah, Ms. Helen's cousin. She told me you make the best grilled cheese sandwiches in Maplewood. Could you make a special order for my mom's birthday? We can pay well." It was the first private order she had received. That night, sitting in her kitchen with her mother and her recipe notebook, she began to plan a menu that would combine family tradition with the innovations she had been developing. "Look, Mom," she showed Eleanor her scribbled notes. "I think I could start taking special orders on weekends. Extra money for when the baby arrives." Eleanor studied her daughter's notes with the seriousness of an academic reviewing a doctoral thesis. "My dear, this isn't just extra work. This is a business waiting to be born." Marina's mother's birthday party was held in a small backyard, decorated with festive streamers and marigolds. Chloe arrived with trays of special grilled cheese sandwiches, unique stewed tacos, and sauces she had prepared the night before, while her son gently kicked, as if supervising the process. "My goodness!" exclaimed the birthday celebrant after the first bite. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My great-grandmother taught me the secrets," Chloe replied, "but my son is teaching me to dream bigger." By the end of the night, she had received 3 more orders, and Marina's phone held a list of contacts interested in her services. She drove back home on the night bus, feeling as if she were floating in a beautiful dream. During May, as her body prepared to bring new life into the world, her mind also prepared to give birth to dreams that had been secretly brewing. Weekends filled with special orders, sweet 16 parties, birthdays, small family celebrations that became memorable experiences thanks to the food she prepared with a passion that grew day by day. Mr. Henderson observed this transformation with a mix of pride and nostalgia. "You know what, young lady?" he told her one afternoon, as they cleaned the kitchen after a particularly busy day. "You have the gift I had to search 40 years for in working kitchens. Are you born with it, or do you never have it?" "What gift, Mr. Henderson?" "The gift of making people feel loved through food. It's the rarest and most valuable gift there is." That night, Chloe stayed awake writing in her notebook. Not just recipes, but also ideas, dreams, plans that seemed impossible, but that something in her heart whispered were simply improbable, not impossible. Her great-grandmother had been right. The strongest roots grow in the hardest soil, and Chloe was beginning to feel those roots extend deeply into the ground of her new reality, preparing to support a tree of dreams that would one day bear sweeter fruit than she had ever imagined. The future, which had seemed so terrifying just months before, now stretched before her like a blank canvas waiting to be painted with the most vibrant colors of hope, talent, and the transformative love she carried both in her womb and in her heart. June 2017 brought with it the intense heat of the Maplewood summer and the imminent arrival of the being who would forever change Chloe's perception of love, strength, and the purpose of her existence. The last weeks of pregnancy felt like an eternity, compressed into days that moved with the slowness of thick honey under the scorching sun. Work at the Tasty Corner Diner had become more challenging with each passing day. Her body, now heavy and tired, protested against the long hours on her feet, but her spirit remained lifted by the constant stream of customers who came specifically for her food. Mr. Henderson had installed a tall chair next to the griddle so she could work more comfortably, a gesture that moved her to tears. "Don't cry, young lady," he had told her with his paternal smile. "Salty tears ruin the flavor." On June 15th, while preparing red sauce in the mortar and pestle she had brought from home, Chloe felt the first real contraction. It wasn't like the false pains she had experienced over the past few weeks. This one was different, deep, as if the earth itself was moving within her. "Mr. Henderson," she whispered, clutching the edge of the table as a second wave of pain washed over her. "I think it's time." The chaos that followed was beautiful in its imperfection. Mr. Henderson immediately closed the diner, ignoring the protests of customers waiting for their special grilled cheese. Eleanor rushed over from her job at the textile factory, her dress still splattered with colored threads. The neighbors in the community, who had come to consider Chloe part of their extended family, spontaneously organized to accompany her to the hospital. At Maplewood General Hospital, as the contractions intensified like increasingly powerful waves, Chloe clung to her mother's hand and thought of all the women in her lineage who had gone through this same sacred process of bringing life into the world. "Great-grandma," she whispered between contractions, "help me be strong." Leo Miller arrived at the hospital at 11:47 p.m. on June 16th, during a thunderstorm that illuminated the Maplewood sky with silver flashes that seemed to celebrate his arrival. When the doctor placed him on Chloe's chest, she immediately knew she had been wrong about everything. This wasn't a baby with special needs. This was a teacher who had chosen to come and teach her lessons she couldn't learn any other way. Leo had Down syndrome, but his eyes shone with an ancient intelligence and a wisdom that seemed to transcend his age. When he looked at her for the first time, Chloe felt as if she were looking directly into the soul of someone who had come with a specific mission: to teach her about unconditional love, infinite patience, and the beauty that exists in difference. "Hello, my teacher," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks like rivers of pure gratitude. "I've been waiting for you my whole life." The first days at home were a complete revolution of routines, priorities, and understanding of what truly mattered in life. Leo was a quiet baby, but intensely observant. He seemed to study every face, every sound, every movement, with a concentration that was almost adult in its intensity. Eleanor became the most devoted grandmother who had ever existed. "This child," she told Chloe while rocking Leo during one of those long nights of the early days, "has something special. I can see it in his eyes. He's going to teach us important things." Mr. Henderson closed the diner for a whole week to allow Chloe to recover, something that in normal circumstances would have been impossible for a small business. But customers not only understood, but began sending homemade food, baby clothes, and small gifts that accumulated in the apartment as tangible symbols of a community's love. When Chloe returned to work after 3 weeks, she brought Leo with her. Henderson had set up a makeshift bassinet in the corner of the kitchen, from where the baby could observe the daily ballet of food preparation. "Children who grow up in kitchens," Mr. Henderson had said, with that empirical wisdom that comes from decades of experience, "develop the most refined palate, and this baby is going to be special in the kitchen. I can sense it." He was right. From his first weeks of life, Leo seemed to respond to the aromas and sounds of the kitchen with an attention that bordered on the mystical. When Chloe ground spices, he turned his little head towards the sound, as if listening to music. When she fried onions, his eyes lit up as if witnessing fireworks. But even more surprising was the effect Leo's presence had on Chloe's food. It was as if her maternal love had unlocked a new dimension of her culinary talent. Customers began to comment that the food tasted different, richer, with more soul. "What are you putting in it now, Ms. Helen asked one afternoon, holding a grilled cheese sandwich as if it were a sacred relic. "This tastes like pure happiness." "I put mother's love in it," Chloe replied simply, looking towards Leo, who slept peacefully in his bassinet, as the aromas of the kitchen lulled him like an olfactory lullaby. During July, as she adapted to the routine of being a working mother, Chloe began to notice profound changes in her own perspective on success, happiness, and purpose. Professional goals that once seemed important now paled in comparison to the simple miracle of watching Leo discover the world every day. One afternoon, while feeding her son in the quiet of their apartment, she received a phone call that would change the course of her thoughts about the future. "Chloe?" The voice was masculine, mature, unknown. "My name is Arthur Sterling. I heard about your food through several friends," he continued. "I was wondering if you'd be interested in catering a special event." The event was an anniversary celebration for a local business couple. 50 guests, a full menu, a generous budget. As Mr. Sterling spoke, describing what he needed, Chloe found herself imagining possibilities that extended far beyond this single event. "Could we meet to discuss the details?" Mr. Sterling asked. "Of course," Chloe replied, feeling an excitement she hadn't experienced since discovering her culinary talent. "Where would you like to meet?" "There's a coffee shop near Union Square, the Corner Cafe. Do you know the place?" "Yes, I know it." "Tomorrow at 4 in the afternoon?" After hanging up the phone, Chloe looked at Leo, who was watching her with those wise eyes that seemed to understand more than should be possible for a 1-month-old baby. "What do you think, my teacher?" she asked him. "Do you think Mom is ready for something bigger?" Leo then smiled, his first real smile, as if giving his blessing for the adventure that was about to begin. In that moment, Chloe felt her great-grandmother was present in the room, whispering words of encouragement that only her heart could hear. The future, which had seemed so limited by circumstances, suddenly expanded like the night sky full of stars, infinite, mysterious, and full of possibilities that shone with the promise of dreams yet to be born. The Corner Cafe stood as a haven of tranquility amidst the bustling evening in downtown Maplewood. Its worn wooden tables and wrought iron chairs had witnessed thousands of conversations that had changed lives, sealed destinies, and forged relationships that endured for generations. When Chloe arrived, exactly at 4 in the afternoon with Leo, sleeping peacefully in his stroller, she didn't know she was about to participate in one of those transformative conversations. Arthur Sterling was waiting for her at a table by the window overlooking Union Square. He was a man of about 50, of medium build and a dignified presence, dressed in a crisp white linen shirt and dark trousers that suggested professional success without ostentation. But what struck Chloe most were his eyes. They held a mix of keen intelligence and a deep sadness that seemed to have been polished by years of difficult experiences. "Ms. Miller," he immediately rose upon seeing her, extending his hand with a genuine smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, and this must be the famous Leo I've heard about." Chloe was surprised. "You've heard about my son?" "In a small community like ours, good news travels fast, especially when it involves someone who has managed to get a whole neighborhood talking about grilled cheese sandwiches that taste like a miracle." As they sat and ordered coffee, Chloe discreetly studied this man, who had appeared in her life at such a crucial moment. There was something familiar about him, as if she had seen him before, but she couldn't place where or when. "Tell me about your culinary experience," Mr. Sterling began, though his eyes constantly shifted to Leo, with an expression Chloe couldn't fully decipher. For the next hour, she shared her story, from her days working at Grandma's kitchen to her humiliating dismissal, her time at the Tasty Corner Diner, and the gradual awakening of her culinary talent. Mr. Sterling listened with an almost hypnotic attention, asking questions that demonstrated not only genuine interest, but also a surprising knowledge of the restaurant business. "And what are your plans for the future?" he finally asked. Honestly, Chloe looked towards Leo, who had woken up and was watching the leaves of the tree gently swaying in the evening breeze. "I haven't thought much beyond doing this job for you and continuing with special orders on weekends. My priority right now is my son." "Of course, but allow me to ask you something different." Mr. Sterling leaned slightly forward. If you could do anything in the world of cooking, without limitations of money or circumstances, what would you do? The question took her completely by surprise. No one had ever asked her about her biggest dreams, only about her most immediate plans. For a moment, she allowed her mind to wander into territories she had carefully kept blocked. "I'd have my own restaurant," she said slowly, as if she were discovering her own thoughts as she spoke. "Not big, but cozy. A place where families would come to celebrate special moments, where I could teach my great-grandmother's recipes, but also create new traditions." She paused, blushing slightly. "And what else? This is going to sound ridiculous. The best dreams always sound ridiculous at first. I'd like to have a cooking school, to teach young people who come from difficult situations, like mine, to show them that cooking can be more than a job. It can be a form of art, a way to serve the community, a source of pride and purpose." Mr. Sterling smiled then, and for the first time since they had sat down, the sadness in his eyes completely vanished. "You know what, Chloe? I think we've found something much more important than a simple catering job." Over the next 2 hours, Mr. Sterling spoke about concepts that were completely new to her: business plans, market studies, financial projections, marketing strategies. But he did so in a way that transformed these intimidating terms into accessible tools for building the dreams she had just articulated. "I have a proposal for you," he finally said, as the sun began to descend towards the mountains surrounding Maplewood. "But before I make it, I need you to know something about me." Chloe waited, feeling she was about to hear something important. "I had a daughter. Her name was Emily. She was about your age when we had a very painful family breakdown 5 years ago. She was a chef, like you want to be. She had similar dreams to what you've just described." Mr. Sterling's voice cracked slightly, but he continued. "Since then, I've been looking for ways to honor those dreams she had. I've invested in several small restaurants. I've helped young chefs get established, but I've never found someone who combines culinary talent with the social vision Emily had. Until now." Chloe felt tears forming in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, Arthur, please," he interrupted. "And my proposal is this. I want to be your investment partner, not just for a restaurant, but for everything you've just described. The restaurant, the school, the complete vision. In return, I only ask that you allow me to be part of something I know would make my daughter proud." The world seemed to stop. Leo, as if sensing the importance of the moment, made a happy little sound that made both adults smile. "I don't know what to say," Chloe murmured. "Don't say anything now. Think about it. Talk to your family. And when you're ready, if you're interested, we can start turning those dreams into reality." That night, Chloe didn't sleep. She stayed awake in her bed, with Leo sleeping beside her, processing the most surreal conversation of her life. Her mind jumped between excitement and fear, between possibility and disbelief. "What do you think, great-grandma?" she whispered into the darkness. "Is this really happening?" In response, a gentle breeze came through the open window, carrying the scent of the bougainvillea flowers growing in the patio. It was the scent she had always associated with her great-grandmother, and in that moment, she interpreted it as a blessing. The next morning, she arrived early at the Tasty Corner diner and told Mr. Henderson everything. The older man listened in silence, nodding occasionally, until she finished. "Young lady," he finally said, "in 40 years working in kitchens, I've seen many talented cooks, but very few with vision. You have both. If this man can help you build what you describe, it would be a sin not to try. But what if I fail? What if you don't try and spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened?" 3 days later, Chloe called Mr. Sterling. "I'm ready to try," she told him, but I want to do it step by step, and I want to keep my job here until I'm sure this is real." "That sounds perfect. How about we start with the catering event? It'll be a good test for both of us." The event took place 2 weeks later in an elegant colonial house in the Greenwood neighborhood. Chloe prepared a menu that combined traditional dishes with subtle innovations. Tableside prepared guacamole in stone bowls, pumpkin flour quesadillas with local goat cheese, carnitas tacos with caramelized pineapple, and a 3-milk cake infused with vanilla from exotic lands. The guests, prosperous entrepreneurs and successful professionals, were absolutely captivated. By the end of the night, Chloe had received 6 additional orders for future events and 3 offers for menu consulting. "I think," Mr. Sterling told her as they packed the last dishes, "we've just proven that this isn't just a dream. It's a business plan waiting to be executed." That night, while feeding Leo in the quiet of her apartment, Chloe felt that her life had taken an irreversible turn towards a future she could barely imagine. The baby looked at her with those wise eyes, as if he knew his mom was about to embark on an adventure that would change not only their lives, but the lives of many people she didn't yet know. Destiny, that invisible architect of human lives, had begun to build something beautiful from the fragments of a humiliation that had seemed like the end of everything. But that in reality had been the first step toward something extraordinary. September 2017 arrived with the first cool breezes, announcing the change of season and the beginning of the peak tourist season in Maplewood. For Chloe, it also marked the start of the most intense and exciting phase of her life up to that point. Catering events had multiplied, and every weekend she found herself cooking for celebrations ranging from intimate weddings to elegant corporate events. Leo, now 3 months old, had developed a routine that seemed to perfectly synchronize with his mother's work schedule. During mornings, at the Tasty Corner Diner, he slept peacefully in his bassinet, while she prepared sauces and stews. In the afternoons, when she worked on event preparations, he remained awake and alert, as if supervising every aspect of the culinary operation. "This child has the soul of a chef," Mr. Henderson commented one morning, observing how Leo turned his head towards the sound of spices being ground. "Look how he responds to the aromas. It's as if he already understands that the kitchen is a sacred place." The relationship with Mr. Sterling had evolved from a professional partnership to something that felt more like a paternal mentorship. They met twice a week at different cafes in the downtown area, where he taught her aspects of the restaurant business she would never have learned from daily work: cost analysis, inventory management, strategic marketing, and most importantly, how to build a brand that was more than just food. "A successful restaurant," Mr. Sterling explained during one of these educational sessions, "doesn't just feed bodies. It feeds emotions, memories, and human connections. Your job is to create experiences that people want to repeat and share." During October, they received an opportunity that would completely change the trajectory of their plans. The Maplewood Food Festival, the most important cultural event in Maplewood, was looking for local food vendors for a special gastronomic pavilion. Sterling had submitted Chloe's application without telling her, and they were selected to participate. "The food festival?" Chloe exclaimed when he gave her the news. "But that's huge. Tourists will come from all over the country." "Exactly. And it will be the perfect opportunity to test if we're ready for the next level." Preparations for the festival were intense. Chloe worked with a team of local cooks Mr. Sterling had hired, developing a menu that could be prepared in large volume without losing the artisanal quality that had made her food famous. It was her first experience leading a team, and she discovered she had a natural talent for management that perfectly complemented her culinary skills. "How did you learn to explain things so clearly?" asked Eleanor, her mother, who had taken time off from her job to help with the event logistics. "It's as if you're a natural teacher." "I think it comes from Leo," Chloe replied, looking towards her son, who was sleeping in his carrier as she organized inventories. "Being with him has taught me to be more patient, to explain things step by step, to find different ways to communicate." The opening day of the food festival's gastronomic pavilion dawned with clear skies and an electric energy that could be felt throughout the city. Tourists from dozens of states filled the historic streets, and the aroma of traditional American food mingled with the sounds of folk music and conversations in multiple languages. Chloe's stall, decorated with traditional banners and black and white photographs of Maplewood women cooking through the decades, immediately became one of the most popular in the pavilion. Her special grilled cheese sandwiches, served on corn husks with sauces that changed depending on the time of day, created lines that extended far beyond what they had anticipated. "This is incredible," shouted a French tourist after trying the carnitas taco with caramelized pineapple. "Where can I learn to cook like this?" It was the 10th time that day someone had asked about cooking classes. That night, as they counted the first day's earnings and organized the ingredients for the next, Mr. Sterling looked at Chloe with a significant smile. "Did you hear all those questions about cooking classes?" "Yes, it was surprising." "Not so surprising. I think we've just confirmed that the market for your cooking school is much bigger than we thought." The festival lasted 2 weeks, and each day brought confirmations that they were on the right track. Food journalists wrote glowing articles about the innovative authenticity of the food. Travel bloggers shared photographs that went viral on social media. And most importantly, they established connections with other chefs, suppliers, and entrepreneurs who would become key elements of her professional network. On the last day of the festival, as they packed up equipment and gathered decorations, Chloe sat for a moment with Leo in her arms, observing the gradually emptying pavilion. "You know what, my love?" she whispered to her son. "I think your mom is ready for the next step." November brought more frequent meetings with Mr. Sterling to plan the official launch of her culinary venture. They had decided to call it Roots and Branches, a name Chloe had dreamed one night after a particularly intense conversation with her great-grandmother in her dreams. The roots represent tradition, ancestral recipes, the wisdom that comes from our grandmothers, she had explained. The branches represent growth, innovation, the way those traditions can evolve to nourish new generations. Mr. Sterling had been so impressed with the concept that he immediately registered the name and began working on developing the visual brand with a graphic designer specializing in artisan food businesses. During December, exactly 1 year after her humiliating dismissal from Grandma's kitchen, Chloe signed the incorporation papers for Roots and Branches, LLC, in a small but significant ceremony at the notary's office. With Leo in her arms and Mr. Sterling as a witness, she officially became an entrepreneur. Exactly 1 year ago, she reflected as she walked along the same streets where she had cried after losing her job, I thought my world had ended. Now, I understand, it was only just beginning. That night, she prepared a special dinner for her mother and for Mr. Henderson, who had been like a father during the most difficult months. As she served the rich stew she had perfected over the year, with homemade biscuits and fresh sautéed greens, she realized she had achieved something that seemed impossible 12 months earlier. She had transformed a devastating crisis into the foundation of a prosperous future. To the roots that sustain us, Eleanor toasted, raising her glass of iced tea, and to the branches that will grow towards the sky. To the branches that will grow towards the sky, everyone repeated, including Leo, who clapped his tiny hands as if he perfectly understood the importance of the moment. In silence, Chloe thanked her great-grandmother, life, and the mysterious destiny that had used her darkest moment to plant her in the perfect soil, where her boldest dreams could finally take root and flourish. The year 2010 dawned with promises that seemed as bright as the winter sun, bathing the colonial rooftops of Maplewood. Chloe began January dividing her time between her work at the Tasty Corner Diner, which she had decided to maintain for the first few months to ensure financial stability, and the development of Roots and Branches, which grew day by day like a young but resilient tree. Leo, now 7 months old, had developed a personality that constantly surprised those who knew him. Despite his special needs, or perhaps precisely because of them, he possessed an extraordinary ability to connect emotionally with people. Mr. Henderson's customers specifically stopped to greet him, and he responded with smiles that seemed to light up the entire diner. "This child has a special gift," observed Ms. Eleanor from the market, who had come for lunch and had been fascinated watching Leo follow his mother's movements in the kitchen. "It's as if he can feel people's emotions and help them feel better." It was true. Chloe had noticed that when she cooked with Leo nearby, especially during the most stressful catering events, she maintained a calm she hadn't had before. It was as if her son's presence constantly reminded her of what truly mattered: love, family, and service to others. In February, they received their first truly big commission: the wedding of the daughter of a prosperous businessman who had tasted her food during the food festival. The celebration would be for 300 guests at a restored estate on the outskirts of the city, with a budget that exceeded anything they had handled before. "This is different," Mr. Sterling warned her during one of their planning meetings. "It's not just bigger, it's more complex. We'll need equipment, skilled staff, precise logistics. Do you feel ready?" Chloe looked towards Leo, who was playing with a rattle made of dried gourds that Ms. Eleanor had given him. "With him by my side, I feel ready for anything." The preparations for the wedding were like an intensive course in business management. Chloe learned about team coordination, large-scale quality control, and the crucial importance of backup systems when working with unique and unrepeatable events. She hired 6 local cooks, each specializing in different aspects of traditional American cuisine. During the weeks leading up to the event, she turned her apartment kitchen into a laboratory where they developed and perfected recipes that could be perfectly executed for 300 people. "The key," she explained to her team during one of the practice sessions, "is to maintain the artisanal soul in every dish, no matter how many we're preparing. Every grilled cheese must taste as if we're making it just for our family." The wedding day dawned perfectly. Blue skies, ideal temperature, and a collaborative energy among the team Chloe had assembled. The estate, with its gardens full of seasonal flowers and its pink sandstone walls that captured the golden morning light, provided the perfect setting for a memorable celebration. The culinary operation unfolded like a well-conducted symphony. While Chloe supervised the preparation of the main dishes, Eleanor coordinated the appetizer service, and the cooks worked at specialized stations that produced everything from fresh rolls to elaborate sauces made with herbs that had been roasted that very morning. Leo, in his special carrier, observed everything from a strategic position that allowed him to see both the kitchen and the service area. The servers, initially surprised to see a baby in the work area, quickly discovered that his presence had a calming effect on the entire operation. "He's like our little supervisor," joked one of the servers during a moment of pause. "Whenever things get tense, I look at him and remember that this should be fun." The highlight came during the main dinner, when guests sampled the menu Chloe had designed specifically to reflect the couple's love story. Tableside prepared avocado dip in stone bowls, pulled pork tacos marinated for 24 hours, vibrant salads representing the colors of the American flag, and a 3-milk cake infused with vanilla that had been the couple's favorite dessert during their courtship. "This is extraordinary," exclaimed the bride's father, approaching the cooking station where Chloe was supervising the last dishes. "In 30 years of organizing events, I've never tasted American food so authentic and so refined at the same time." By the end of the night, after the last guest had been served and the last dish had been cleaned, Chloe sat in a garden chair with Leo in her arms, observing the stars shining over the estate. "We did it, my love," she whispered. "Your mom officially knows how to handle big events." The response came in the form of orders. Over the next few weeks, she received 6 requests for weddings, 3 for corporate events, and an invitation to cater a food festival in New York City. More importantly, she received a call from a national gastronomy magazine that wanted to do an article on the new generation of American chefs who honor tradition while embracing innovation. "I think," Mr. Sterling told her during their weekly meeting, "it's time we seriously consider opening the restaurant." The idea excited and terrified her at the same time. A catering event, no matter how big, was temporary. A restaurant was a permanent commitment, a statement that she was ready to plant deep roots in the Maplewood culinary community. During March, they began looking for locations. They visited dozens of spaces in different neighborhoods of the city, from modern venues in commercial areas to colonial houses that would require complete renovation. Each visit was a lesson about location, customer flow, operating costs, and the crucial importance of finding a space that reflected the personality of the brand they were building. The perfect space appeared when they least expected it. They were returning from seeing a particularly disappointing property when Mr. Sterling stopped in front of a colonial building in the historic downtown. "How about that one?" he asked, pointing to a 2-story mansion with wrought iron balconies and a ground floor that had been a restaurant decades ago. "It's closed," Chloe observed. "The best diamonds are usually hidden," Mr. Sterling replied with a mysterious smile. It turned out he knew the owner, a retired architect, who had been looking for the perfect tenant to restore the building's gastronomic vocation. When they visited the interior, Chloe immediately felt she had found her professional home. The high ceilings with original wooden beams, the stone walls that had witnessed centuries of Maplewood history, the tiled floors that reflected the natural light entering through large colonial windows. Everything in the space whispered possibilities. "I can see the tables there," she murmured, walking through the main hall, while Leo observed everything from his carrier. "And an open kitchen where customers can see the preparation. And on the 2nd floor? What about the 2nd floor?" "The cooking school, classrooms where I can teach, a recipe library, a space where young people can come to learn that cooking can change their lives." That night they signed the lease. As she walked back to her apartment through the cobblestone streets of downtown, Chloe felt she had crossed an invisible threshold. She was no longer just a woman with culinary talent and big dreams. She was an entrepreneur with a concrete plan, a clear vision, and the determination to turn both into reality. The flight had officially begun, and although she knew there would be turbulence ahead, she also knew she had strong enough wings to carry herself, Leo, and all the dreams that had been waiting, their moment to take flight towards the infinite sky of possibilities. April 2018 arrived with a cruelty Chloe had not anticipated. Just when everything seemed to align perfectly for the opening of her restaurant, reality hit her with a series of obstacles that tested not only her financial resilience, but also her faith in the project that had begun to define her identity. The first sign of trouble came during the initial inspection of the leased premises. What initially seemed like a perfectly preserved colonial house revealed structural problems that would require a much greater investment than they had calculated. The electrical and plumbing systems needed complete renovation. The kitchen required extensive modifications to comply with modern health regulations, and moisture damage was discovered in several walls that threatened the integrity of the second floor where she planned to establish the cooking school. "Renovation costs are going to triple our initial budget," Mr. Sterling informed her during a meeting that felt more like an emergency room than a planning session. "We can look for another location, or we can significantly adjust our timeline and our expectations." Chloe, with Leo sleeping in his stroller after a difficult night where he had a fever, felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had left her job at the Tasty Corner Diner the previous week, confident that the restaurant's opening was imminent. Now she found herself without regular income, with increasing expenses, and facing the possibility that her dream was financially unviable. "How much time would it take to find another location?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, despite the anxiety growing in her stomach like a cold tide. "At least 3 months, and there's no guarantee we'll find anything better in our price range." That night, Chloe stayed awake very late, making calculations in a worn notebook while Leo slept beside her. Her savings from catering events would run out in 2 months if she had no income, and the money Sterling had invested was committed to renovation costs, and she had catering commitments for the next 2 months that would require equipment and staff she could no longer easily afford. The second crisis arrived a week later, when 2 of her biggest catering events were canceled at the last minute. The first, a wedding for 200 guests, was canceled due to a dramatic breakup between the engaged couple. The second, a corporate event, was canceled when the company decided to cut expenses due to internal financial problems. "This is normal in the business," Mr. Sterling tried to reassure her, though she could see the worry in his eyes. "Setbacks always come in streaks. The key is to maintain perspective and adapt." But Chloe was struggling to maintain perspective. Without that income, she would have to borrow money from her mother, who was already working overtime at the textile factory, to help with the baby's expenses. The idea of making Eleanor a victim of her entrepreneurial ambitions filled her with a guilt that felt physical, like a constant weight on her chest. The third crisis was the most emotionally devastating. During a routine pediatrician visit, the doctor expressed concerns about Leo's development that would require specialized evaluations and possibly expensive therapies not covered by her basic health insurance. "It's nothing urgent," Dr. Wilson explained, "but the earlier we intervene, the better the long-term results will be. Early developmental therapies can be transformative for children like Leo." Sitting in the waiting room after the consultation, with Leo in her arms and a list of specialists she would need to contact, Chloe felt she was drowning in responsibilities that grew faster than her ability to manage them. "What do I do, my love?" she whispered to Leo. "How can I give you everything you need and also pursue this dream that seems more impossible every day?" Leo looked at her with those wise eyes and smiled, as if trying to remind her of something important she had forgotten. At that moment, an older woman sitting nearby approached. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with the doctor. I'm a child development therapist. If you need information about resources available in the community, I'd love to help you." For the next 20 minutes, Ms. Teresa Adams explained governmental programs, nonprofit organizations, and support networks for families with children with special needs that Chloe didn't know existed. More importantly, she offered a perspective that completely changed her way of viewing the situation. "Children like Leo are teachers," Ms. Teresa told her. "They teach us about patience, about unconditional love, about finding joy in small daily miracles. His presence in your professional life is not an obstacle. It's a unique strength that will differentiate you from any other chef or entrepreneur." That conversation planted a seed that began to germinate during the following weeks. As she struggled with the financial and logistical crises of her business, she began to see connections she hadn't perceived before between her experience as a mother of a child with special needs and her vision for the cooking school. In May, she made a decision that initially seemed like a step backward, but would turn out to be the most strategic move of her career. Instead of striving to open the restaurant according to the original timeline, she decided to focus all her energy on developing a specialized catering program that could generate immediate income while gradually building towards her bigger goals. "We're going to be the best catering company in Maplewood," she announced to Mr. Sterling during a meeting that marked a turning point in their partnership. "And we're going to do it in a way no one else is doing." Her concept was revolutionary in its simplicity. Gastronomic events that not only nourished bodies, but also educated about culinary traditions, employed young people in vulnerable situations, and included elements of disability awareness. Each event would become a small lesson about community, inclusion, and the transformative power of food prepared with purpose. The first event under this new model took place in June for the anniversary celebration of a local nonprofit organization. Instead of simply serving food, Chloe organized interactive stations where guests learned about the origin of each dish, met the young people who had helped with the preparation, and listened briefly about how gastronomy could be a tool for social integration. Leo, now 1-year-old, participated as the official ambassador of the event, enchanting guests with his magnetic personality and wordlessly demonstrating that difference enriches rather than limits. "This is much more than catering," commented one of the guests, a local journalist who ended up writing an article about the event. "It's a learning experience disguised as a celebration." By the end of June, Chloe realized that the storm that had threatened to destroy her dreams had actually refined, concentrated, and empowered them. She had learned that obstacles were not signals to give up, but invitations to innovate. Sitting in her apartment one night, with Leo sleeping peacefully beside her, and her notebook full of ideas for future events, she wrote an entry that summarized everything she had learned during the most difficult months of her entrepreneurial life. "The strongest dreams are not those that never face storms, but those that learn to use the headwind to fly higher." July 2018 brought with it a suffocating heat that seemed to emanate not only from the relentless sun, punishing Maplewood's cobblestone streets, but also from the questions that began to burn in Chloe's mind, like embers refusing to extinguish. During one of her weekly trips to the Maplewood market to buy fresh ingredients, a casual conversation with Ms. Eleanor left her with more doubts than certainties about the events that had triggered her transformation. "You know what, dear, Ms. Eleanor had said while weighing poblano peppers with the precision of decades of experience. "It always seemed strange to me how you were fired from Grandma's kitchen. Mark can be a jerk, but that day he was particularly nervous, as if he was in a hurry to get you out of there before you saw something you shouldn't have seen." Ms. Eleanor's words continued to resonate in her mind for days. Chloe had been so focused on rebuilding her life and developing her business that she had never really investigated the circumstances of her dismissal. She had accepted the humiliation as a fait accompli, an injustice she had to overcome rather than understand. But now, 18 months later, and with a more mature perspective on the business world, she began to see patterns she hadn't perceived before. The irregularities she had observed during her time working at the restaurant had not been casual administrative errors. The whispered conversations between Mark and certain suppliers had not been normal discussions about prices, and her dismissal, so public and cruel, had not been just the whim of an abusive boss. "Arthur," she said during one of their regular meetings at the corner cafe, I need to ask you something that might sound strange. Did you ever eat at Grandma's kitchen before that day in December when I was fired?" Mr. Sterling paused with his coffee cup halfway to his lips, an almost imperceptible expression of surprise crossing his face before he replied. "Yes, I had eaten there a few times. Why do you ask?" "It's just, there are things about that day that never added up. And now that I understand better how restaurants work, I wonder if there was more than I could see at the time." Over the next few weeks, Chloe began a discreet investigation that led her down paths she hadn't expected to explore. She spoke with former restaurant employees, market suppliers, and other restaurant owners who knew about Mark's operation. Each conversation added pieces to a puzzle that revealed a progressively clearer and more disturbing picture. The first important discovery came from Robert, a waiter who had worked at Grandma's kitchen for 3 years before abruptly quitting 2 months after Chloe's dismissal. "Sister," Robert confessed to her during a casual encounter in the town square, "I saw things I shouldn't have seen. Fake invoices, money being diverted, suppliers paying for contracts that were never fully fulfilled. Mark had a whole system set up." "And why didn't you say anything? To whom? Mark knows half the town, and besides, I have a family to feed. But after what he did to you, I couldn't keep working there." The second discovery came through Michelle, an accountant who occasionally helped small restaurants with their books and who had been contacted by the owners of Grandma's kitchen for an audit after they began to suspect irregularities. "I can't give you specific details due to professional confidentiality," Michelle explained during a lunch at a diner on the other side of town. "But I can tell you that when we started reviewing the numbers, we found significant discrepancies dating back several months. And curiously, the biggest irregularities coincided with periods when a certain employee had been working shift that gave her access to sensitive information." Chloe felt her blood run cold. "Are you suggesting I was fired because they thought I was involved in the fraud?" "I'm suggesting someone needed a scapegoat, and a pregnant employee with no political influence was the perfect target." That night, Chloe couldn't sleep. She stayed awake beside Leo, who slept with the absolute tranquility of innocence, processing the possibility that her dismissal had not been simply an act of cruelty, but a calculated maneuver to protect those truly responsible for the financial irregularities. The third revelation came from the least expected source. Mr. Henderson, who had maintained a casual friendship with several employees of Grandma's kitchen through his membership in the local restaurant association. "Young lady," he told her one afternoon as they cleaned the kitchen of the Tasty Corner diner together, where she occasionally helped during special events. "There's something you should know. Mark has been talking to people, saying you stole money, and that's why they had to let you go." "What?" The news hit her like a physical punch. But here's the interesting part. He only says it when he's drunk, and he always adds details that don't match, as if he's trying to convince himself of a lie he knows. Knows is a lie. August arrived with torrential rains that transformed the streets of Maplewood into temporary rivers and filled the air with the earthy scent of petrichor. For Chloe, it was a month of revelations that led her to make a decision that would forever change her relationship with her past. She decided to confront Mark directly. The opportunity came when she learned through the market's gossip network that he was going through serious financial difficulties. The restaurant had lost several of its best customers, debts were accumulating, and he had begun frequenting the downtown bars with a regularity that worried those who knew him. She found him one rainy afternoon at the Alley Dive, a small, dark establishment where men went to drink their sorrows and temporarily forget the complications of their lives. Mark was sitting alone at a corner table, with 3 empty beer bottles in front of him and a 4th half-finished. "Mark," she said simply, sitting down in front of him without invitation. He looked up and for a moment seemed not to recognize her. When he finally registered who she was, a mix of surprise, guilt, and something that might have been relief crossed his face. "Chloe, I didn't expect. What are you doing here?" "I came to hear the truth. About why you really fired me. About the irregularities at the restaurant. About why you needed me to leave before I discovered what was going on." For the next 40 minutes, in that dark bar, as the rain beat against the fogged windows, Mark told her a story that explained everything and complicated everything at the same time. He had been siphoning money from the restaurant to pay off gambling debts that had spiraled out of control. The fake invoices, the duplicate payments to suppliers, the missing cash from the register. It had all been to feed an addiction that had started as entertainment and had become a destructive compulsion. "I knew you were catching on," he admitted, avoiding her gaze. "You're too smart. You started asking questions about invoices, noticing when the numbers didn't add up. I needed time to fix things before you discovered everything. So you fired me to protect yourself?" "I fired you because I was scared. And then, after that, it was easier to make it look like you were the problem, instead of admitting I had messed everything up." The confession left her feeling a strange mix of validation and sadness. She had been right to feel that her dismissal hadn't been fair, but knowing the truth didn't provide the satisfaction she had expected. Instead, she saw a man destroyed by his own decisions, living with a guilt that was slowly consuming him. "And now what?" she finally asked. "Now nothing. The restaurant is lost. The debts are too great. In a month or two, I'll have to close it down for good." That night, Chloe walked through the wet streets of Maplewood with a sense of closure she hadn't anticipated. She had gone looking for answers and had found them, but she had also found something more. The understanding that truth is often more complex than the injustice we perceive, and that even the people who hurt us are often struggling with demons we cannot see. When she arrived at her apartment, she wrote a reflection in her notebook that would help her process everything she had learned. The truth doesn't always free us from pain, but it frees us from confusion, and sometimes, understanding why someone hurt us helps us heal not only from the wound, but also from the resentment that prevents the wound from fully closing. September 2018 arrived with that particular melancholy that characterizes the end of the American summer, when the air still retains the warmth of long days, but the nights begin to whisper promises of change. For Chloe, September also marked the beginning of the most introspective and challenging period of her transformation, a month where the truths she had discovered about Mark led her to face even deeper truths about herself. Roots and Branches catering events had found their rhythm, generating consistent income and building a solid reputation in the Maplewood culinary community. Leo, now 15 months old, had developed a personality that constantly surprised those who knew him. He walked with the determination of an explorer, conquering new territory, communicated with a combination of simple words and expressive gestures that melted hearts, and possessed a social intuition that allowed him to connect with people of all ages. But professional success and the joy of motherhood had not completely silenced an inner voice that had begun to whisper uncomfortable questions since her conversation with Mark. What part of her transformation had been genuine personal growth, and what part had simply been a reaction to circumstances? Was she really a visionary entrepreneur, or simply someone who had been lucky enough to find Arthur at the right time? The crisis of confidence began during a planning session for the most ambitious event they had attempted until then, a 3-day food festival that would celebrate the culinary traditions of different regions of America, with the participation of guest chefs, educational workshops, and an exhibition on the history of American gastronomy. It's a huge project, Arthur warned her during one of their meetings, both in terms of logistics and financial responsibility. If it goes well, it will establish roots and branches as a major force in the regional culinary world. If it goes wrong, Chloe completed, we lose all the credibility we've built, and possibly the financial stability you need to care for Leo. That night, after putting Leo to bed and reviewing the festival numbers for the third time, Chloe found herself questioning not only the project's viability, but also her own ability to lead it successfully. What did she really know about organizing events of that magnitude? What made her think she could compete with organizers who had decades of experience? The first big test came when one of the most prestigious guest chefs, whose participation had been the main draw for attracting sponsors, canceled their participation just 3 weeks before the event. His absence not only meant completely reorganizing the culinary program, but also facing the possibility that several sponsors would withdraw their support. This is what separates successful organizers from amateurs, Chloe told herself that night, looking at Leo, who slept peacefully in his crib. How do you respond when everything falls apart? Over the next few days, she worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession to find a solution. She contacted dozens of chefs, restructured the program, negotiated with sponsors, and developed a plan B, C, and D for every aspect of the event. But it was during this crisis resolution process that she discovered something important about herself. Under extreme pressure, she didn't freeze or panic. She became clearer, more focused, more creative. "You have the instinct," Eleanor observed one night, finding her daughter working at the kitchen table surrounded by lists, diagrams, and schedules, while Leo played quietly in his playpen. "Your great-grandmother had the same instinct. When things got tough, she got stronger, not weaker." The second test came when Chloe realized she had been so focused on the logistical aspects of the festival that she had lost sight of the original vision, to create an experience that educated and connected people with their culinary roots. The event had become an impressive exhibition, but it had lost the soul it was supposed to have. "I need to remember why I'm doing this," she told herself one morning while preparing breakfast for Leo. "It's not to impress anyone or prove that I'm capable of organizing big events. It's to honor my great-grandmother, to teach my son about our traditions, to create moments where families connect through food." That realization led her to make a radical decision, to completely restructure the festival to focus on community participation rather than professional exhibition. Instead of celebrity chefs, she invited grandmothers from different neighborhoods to share their secret recipes. Instead of formal demonstrations, she organized hands-on workshops where families could cook together. Instead of static exhibitions, she created interactive stations where children could learn about the origin of different ingredients. "Are you sure about this change?" Arthur asked, reviewing the revised program. "It's very different from what we've been promoting. I'm sure that if it's not authentic to who we are, it won't be worth doing." The festival was held during the second weekend of October under clear skies, and with an energy that transformed Maplewood Central Park into a living laboratory of American culinary traditions. From early morning, entire families arrived with baskets, small bowls, and a palpable curiosity like the aroma of spices toasting on dozens of griddles. Leo, as the official ambassador of the event, enchanted attendees as he explored all the stations in his special stroller, tasting small bites offered by the grandmothers and responding with smiles that provoked exclamations of delight from the participants. "This child has the most refined palate," exclaimed Ms. Helen. Not his mother, but another Ms. Helen from the Valenciana district, after seeing how Leo reacted positively to her 7-spice stew. "He knows how to appreciate good food. But the most revealing moment for Chloe came during the tortilla-making workshop, when an approximately 8-year-old girl who had been struggling to form the dough correctly approached Leo. "Can your baby help me?" she asked shyly. "He seems very smart." Chloe placed Leo in a high chair next to the work table, and something magical happened. The child's presence, his intense concentration as he watched the process, and his enthusiastic applause every time the girl managed to form a tortilla transformed the experience from frustration into a celebration. "It's like he gives me confidence," the girl murmured, finally forming a perfect tortilla. In that moment, Chloe understood something profound about her purpose. She wasn't just a chef or an entrepreneur. She was a facilitator of human connections, someone who used food as a vehicle to create moments where people felt valued, included, and capable of more than they had imagined. At the end of the festival, as they packed up the equipment and counted the modest but satisfying earnings, Arthur made an observation that summarized everything Chloe had learned about herself during those months of growth and self-discovery. "You know what you've achieved here. You didn't just organize a successful event. You created an experience families will remember for years. That can't be taught in any business school. It's something that comes from the heart." That night, writing in her notebook while Leo slept after an exhausting but happy day, Chloe reflected on everything she had discovered about her own capabilities and limitations. True confidence doesn't come from never failing, but from learning that you can recover from any fall. It doesn't come from having all the answers, but from trusting your ability to find solutions. And it definitely doesn't come from external approval, but from knowing that you are acting from a place of authenticity and purpose. November brought with it an invitation that would test everything she had learned about herself. The Maplewood State Tourism Board contacted her to participate in an international food fair in New York City, where she would represent not only her company, but the entire Maplewood culinary tradition to world-class chefs and critics. "It's a huge opportunity," the coordinator explained during a phone call that left her trembling with equal parts excitement and terror, "but also a significant responsibility. You'll be evaluated not only on your food, but on your ability to articulate the history and cultural value of what you prepare." Preparation for the fair required weeks of in-depth research into the historical roots of each dish she planned to present. Chloe immersed herself in culinary history books, interviewed elderly women from the market who held secrets from past generations, and developed a narrative that connected each flavor to specific moments in America's rich cultural history. Leo, now confidently walking and communicating with a vocabulary that grew daily, became her most reliable research companion. He seemed to instinctively understand when his mother needed absolute concentration, and when she needed his laughter to alleviate the tension of preparation. On the day of departure for New York City, as she packed the special ingredients she had carefully selected at the Maplewood market, Chloe felt a mix of nervousness and determination she hadn't experienced since the day she decided to confront Mark. "Are you sure you want to take Leo with you?" Eleanor asked, watching her grandson play with a wooden spoon while his mother organized spices. "It'll be a lot of work." "He's part of my story," Chloe replied without hesitation. "If I'm going to authentically represent who I am, I need him to be with me." The food fair was held at the Capitol's Convention Center, a huge space where aromas from dozens of regional cuisines mingled in an olfactory symphony celebrating the culinary diversity of America. Chloe had been assigned a modest space compared to some of the more established chefs, but from the first day, her station became a magnet for curious visitors. Her presentation combined culinary demonstration with historical storytelling, explaining not only how to prepare each dish, but also why each ingredient held cultural significance. Leo, in his special high chair, acted as a silent co-presenter, enchanting attendees with his enthusiastic participation in each demonstration. "This grilled cheese," she explained, while folding the freshly made tortilla with perfectly melted cheese, "represents 5 centuries of cultural fusion. The corn comes from our indigenous ancestors. The cheese arrived with the settlers, and the way to combine them was born from the ingenuity of women who had to feed their families with the ingredients available." On the second day of the fair, she received a visit that would completely change her perspective on her own progress. Chef Olivia Hayes, an internationally renowned chef who had been discreetly observing her presentation, approached during a pause. "Excuse me," Olivia said. "I'm Olivia Hayes from the American Hearth restaurant in New York. I've been observing your work for the past 2 days, and I have to tell you that what you're doing here is extraordinary." Chloe almost choked on the water she was drinking. Olivia Hayes was a legend in the world of contemporary American gastronomy, someone who had appeared in international magazines and whose restaurants had months-long waiting lists. "You've been observing my work?" "Not just observing, learning. The way you integrate cultural education with the culinary experience. How you include your son as part of the narrative about family and tradition. The authenticity you convey without falling into folklorism. It's exactly what American gastronomy needs right now." For the next 30 minutes, Olivia shared observations about Chloe's work that helped her see her own evolution from a completely new perspective. She wasn't just a woman who had been lucky enough to find a generous investor. She was a culinary artist who had developed a unique approach that combined tradition, innovation, education, and inclusion in ways that chefs with much more experience were still trying to achieve. "Have you considered writing a book?" Olivia asked before leaving. "Your perspective on gastronomy as a tool for family and cultural connection deserves to be shared with a wider audience." That night, in her modest but clean hotel near the convention center, Chloe stayed awake long after Leo fell asleep, processing everything she had learned about herself during those intense days. She had arrived at the fair feeling like an imposter who could be discovered at any moment. She left feeling like a recognized professional who had something genuinely valuable to offer the world. On the last day of the fair, during the closing ceremony where the most outstanding participants were recognized, Chloe received a special mention for innovation in educational presentation and commitment to social inclusion in gastronomy. As she held the small trophy with Leo, enthusiastically clapping in her arms, she realized she had crossed an invisible threshold. She was no longer trying to prove she was capable. She knew she was capable. She was no longer seeking external validation. She had found an internal validation that was much more solid and lasting. The return trip to Maplewood was a silent celebration. As the bus snaked through the mountains towards her hometown, Chloe reflected on the extraordinary path she had traveled since that humiliating afternoon in December 2016. "You know what, my love?" she whispered to Leo, who slept in her arms as the familiar landscape of hills and colonial towns passed by the window. "Your mom finally understands who she is and where she's going." Upon arriving in Maplewood, she found a message from Arthur waiting for her. "I have news I need to share with you. Can we meet tomorrow?" Something in the tone of the message suggested the news would be important. That night, as she unpacked and organized the professional contacts she had made during the fair, she felt she was about to begin a new chapter in a story that became more extraordinary each day than she had ever imagined possible. December 2010 arrived with that crystalline clarity that characterizes winter in the American Midwest, when the air becomes so pure that distant mountains seem painted with precise details against the deep blue sky. For Chloe, December also marked the moment when the scattered pieces of her personal history began to form a picture that would forever change her understanding of the events that had shaped her life. The meeting with Arthur took place in a different location than their usual cafe. His office, an elegant yet welcoming space in a restored colonial building in downtown Maplewood. It was the first time Chloe had visited the place from where he coordinated his multiple investments and philanthropic projects. "There's something I need to tell you," Arthur began, with a seriousness that immediately put Chloe on alert. "Something about my connection to your story that goes deeper than I've revealed to you until now." Leo, now 18 months old, played quietly in a corner of the office with wooden blocks Arthur had specially prepared for his visit. His presence, as always, provided a sense of calm that made difficult conversations feel more manageable. "Do you remember I told you I was present at the restaurant the day you were fired?" "Yes." "What I didn't tell you is why I was there specifically that day." Arthur stood from his desk and walked toward a window overlooking Union Square, where the cherry blossoms were preparing for their spring bloom. His hands, which usually moved with absolute confidence, showed a slight tension Chloe hadn't seen before. "I had received information that Grandma's Kitchen was involved in financial irregularities. As an investor in several restaurants in the region, these things interest me because they affect the reputation of the entire local industry." "Information from whom?" "From someone who worked there. Someone who had noticed discrepancies and was concerned that an innocent employee might be blamed for problems she hadn't caused." Chloe felt her heart quicken. "Who gave you that information?" Arthur returned to his desk and opened a folder that had been closed since she arrived. "Robert Sanchez, the waiter who worked there for 3 years." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Robert was the same waiter who had confirmed her suspicions about Mark's irregularities. "Robert contacted you before my dismissal?" "2 days before. He told me there was a pregnant employee who had been asking questions about discrepancies in invoices, and that he had heard Mark planning to blame her for the shortfalls to cover his own irregularities." "So you knew. You knew something unfair was about to happen to you. That's why I was there that day. To be a witness, to be able to intervene if necessary, and to ensure that if you were unfairly dismissed, you would have options to recover." The implications of this revelation spread through Chloe's mind like ripples in a pond. Her encounter with Arthur had not been accidental. His investment in Roots and Branches had not simply been the result of being impressed with her culinary talent. It had all been part of a plan to correct an injustice he had seen coming, but had been unable to prevent. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you needed to believe in your own talent and ability. If you had known I was there, as your protector, so to speak, it would have changed the entire dynamic of our partnership. You would have doubted every success, wondering if it was real or simply the result of my guilt." Chloe remained silent for several minutes, processing this new information while watching Leo build towers with his wooden blocks, her son unaware of the conversation that was changing his mother's understanding of her own history. He worked with the absolute concentration that characterized everything he did. "There's more," Arthur continued gently. "After we started working together, I decided to investigate Mark's situation more deeply. I wanted to understand not only what he had done, but why he had done it." "And what did you find?" "I found that his financial problems were much more complicated than they superficially seemed. Yes, he had gambling debts, but those debts had accumulated because he was trying to get money for—" Arthur paused, as if carefully evaluating how to continue. "To pay for medical treatments for his younger sister, who needed expensive surgeries not covered by the family's health insurance." This revelation hit Chloe like lightning. The image of Mark as a simplistic villain crumbled, replaced by something much more complex. A man who had made desperate decisions trying to save someone he loved. "That doesn't justify what he did to me," she said finally. "Absolutely not. But it explains the pressure he was operating under, and it explains why, when you finally confronted him at the bar, he seemed so destroyed by guilt. During January 2019, armed with this new understanding of the circumstances surrounding her dismissal, Chloe found herself revisiting many of the emotions she had processed over the past 2 years. The rage she had felt towards Mark transformed into something more complex, a sadness for the circumstances that had led two fundamentally good people to hurt each other. But the most significant revelation came during a conversation with her mother about the changes she had observed in Chloe's personality and perspectives during this period of growth. "My dear," Eleanor told her one afternoon as they prepared food for a catering event in the apartment kitchen, "have you noticed how you've changed the way you talk about the people who have hurt you?" "What do you mean?" "Before, when you talked about Mark, there was a lot of rage in your voice. Justified rage, but rage nonetheless. Now, you talk about him with sadness, but also with understanding. It's as if you've learned to see difficult situations from multiple perspectives." It was true. Chloe had realized that her ability to understand the complex motivations behind people's actions had developed significantly. This evolution had not only helped her heal emotionally, but had also improved her ability to manage work teams and resolve conflicts at her catering events. "I think it comes from Leo," she reflected, looking towards her son, who was experimenting with different dough textures she had given him to play with. "Being with him has taught me patience, but it has also taught me that people are much more complex than they superficially appear." In February, she received a call that would confirm how profoundly her perspective on forgiveness and redemption had changed. It was Robert, the waiter who had alerted Arthur to her situation 2 years earlier. "Chloe, I need to tell you something about Mark. He's in the hospital. Heart problems related to stress and drinking. The doctors say he's very serious." "Is he alone?" "His sister is with him, but it looks like he's been carrying a lot of guilt about what he did to you." Robert paused. "I was wondering I don't know, if maybe you'd like to visit him. Not for him, but for you, to close that chapter completely." That night, Chloe stayed awake for a long time, considering the possibility of visiting Mark in the hospital. Part of her felt that she had already closed that chapter of her life. She had understood the circumstances, had processed the emotions, had moved on successfully. What purpose would reliving that connection serve? But another part of her, the part that had grown during these months of self-discovery, felt there was an opportunity for something bigger than simple personal closure. An opportunity to demonstrate, both to him and to herself, that the deepest transformation comes not from vengeance or resentment, but from the ability to respond to the wound with healing. "What do you think, my love?" she asked Leo during breakfast the next day. "Do you think Mom should go see the man who hurt us?" Leo, with that inexplicable wisdom he seemed to possess from birth, smiled and clapped, as if encouraging her to make the most difficult, but most correct decision. 2 days later, Chloe found herself walking through the halls of Maplewood General Hospital, carrying Leo in her arms and a bag of homemade food she had prepared that morning. She didn't know exactly what she was going to say when she saw Mark, but she knew that being there was the right thing to do. Upon entering the hospital room, she found a man who seemed to have aged decades in 2 years. Mark was hooked up to several monitors, his pale, emaciated face showing the marks of months of emotional self-destruction. When he saw her enter, his eyes immediately filled with tears. "Chloe, I didn't expect. Why did you come?" "I came because we both deserve the peace that comes from true forgiveness." For the next hour, in that hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and hope, two people who had been enemies found a way to become something more. Two human beings who had made mistakes, had suffered consequences, and now had the opportunity to choose healing over resentment. As she left the hospital, Chloe felt she had completed a circle that had begun on that humiliating afternoon in December 2016. But instead of returning to the same place, she had reached a completely new level of understanding about herself, about forgiveness, and about the transformative power of responding to adversity with grace. March 2019 arrived in Maplewood with an explosion of colors that transformed the colonial city into a living canvas of purple cherry blossoms, fuchsia bougainvillea, and red geraniums overflowing from wrought iron balconies. For Chloe, March also marked the blossoming of dreams she had been carefully cultivating for over 2 years, when she finally received the news that would change the course of Roots and Branches forever. "The space is ready," Arthur announced during a phone call that found her preparing tamales for a catering event in her apartment kitchen. "The renovations are complete, the permits have been approved, and we can officially open the restaurant next month." Chloe almost dropped the mortar and pestle she was using to prepare green sauce. After months of delays, financial complications, and design adjustments, the space they had visualized for so long was finally ready to welcome its first customers. "Seriously? Is everything ready?" "Everything. And there's something else. Do you remember Olivia Hayes, the chef you met at the New York City Food Fair?" "Of course. She called yesterday. She wants to come to the opening and is interested in establishing a partnership to bring some of your culinary concepts to her New York restaurant." Leo, now 21 months old, and communicating in complete sentences that constantly surprised those who knew him, seemed to understand the importance of the moment. He approached his mother and handed her one of his favorite toys, as if offering a gift to celebrate the good news. "Thank you, my love," Chloe said, lifting him into her arms. "Are you ready for Mommy to have her own restaurant?" "Mommy cooks yummy," Leo replied with a smile that lit up the entire kitchen. The preparations for the opening of Roots and Branches were intense, but exciting. Chloe worked with a team of designers to create a space that perfectly reflected the restaurant's philosophy. Tradition-honored, but not fossilized. Accessible elegance, but not pretentious. And an atmosphere that made families feel welcome, regardless of their economic circumstances. The result was extraordinary. Hand-carved wooden tables by local artisans, combined with colorful chairs that had been painted by art students from Maplewood University. The walls displayed black and white photographs of women cooking through the decades, interspersed with contemporary art celebrating American cultural diversity. The semi-open kitchen allowed customers to observe the preparation of their meals, while a special area designed for children included a small toy kitchen where the little ones could help prepare imaginary cookies. "It's perfect," Chloe murmured during the final tour before the opening, carrying Leo as she checked every detail. "It's exactly what I visualized, but much better." The second floor, destined for the cooking school, had been equipped with individual workstations, a library of cookbooks that included handwritten recipe books donated by local families, and a conference room where she planned to offer talks on nutrition, culinary history, and gastronomic entrepreneurship. A week before the official opening, she organized a private dinner for family, close friends, and the people who had been fundamental in her transformation. Mr. Henderson arrived dressed in his best shirt, accompanied by several of the regular customers from the Tasty Corner diner, who had followed Chloe's evolution since her early days as a cook. "Young lady," Mr. Henderson told her with tears in his eyes as he observed the restaurant full of life and conversation. "Your great-grandmother would be so proud. You've achieved something very few people do, turning a dream into reality without losing your soul in the process." Eleanor, dressed in a new dress she had sewn especially for the occasion, carried Leo as he greeted all the guests as if he were the official host of the event. "Look what my daughter built," she proudly told anyone willing to listen. "From a fired waitress to a restaurant owner. But more importantly, look at the kind of mother she is. That child will grow up knowing that dreams can come true with hard work and a good heart." The surprise of the night came when Robert and Michelle, the owner of Maria's Kitchen, appeared with a special gift, a volcanic stone mortar and pestle that had belonged to Michelle's grandmother and had been used by 3 generations of cooks. "So you have a piece of history in your new kitchen," Michelle explained, as she presented the beautifully carved mortar and pestle. But the most emotional moment came towards the end of the dinner, when Chloe stood to give a toast that summarized the entire extraordinary journey she had lived during the last 2.5 years. "A little over 2 years ago," she began, with Leo sleeping in his grandmother's arms, "I thought my world had ended when I lost my job. I thought being pregnant and unemployed was the most devastating combination possible. But now I understand that what seemed like an end was, in reality, the beginning of the most extraordinary adventure of my life." When she paused to look around the table where the people who had been her angels during the most difficult moments stood. "I learned that dignity is not negotiable, that talent flourishes under pressure, that the love of a child can completely transform your understanding of your own purpose, and that the most beautiful dreams often arise from the most painful crises. But more than anything, I learned that true success is not measured solely by personal achievements, but by how many people you can help discover their own potential in the process." The applause that followed was more than celebration. It was recognition of a transformation that had inspired an entire community. The official opening of Roots and Branches took place on April 15, 2019, under a perfect blue sky that seemed to have been specially ordered for the occasion. An hour before opening the doors, there was already a line of customers waiting outside, a mix of local families, curious tourists, and food critics who had come specifically to review the new establishment. Olivia Hayes had arrived from New York the day before, and her presence attracted the attention of food journalists from several national publications. "I came because what Chloe is doing here represents the future of American gastronomy," she explained to a reporter. "It's authentic without being nostalgic, innovative without losing respect for tradition, and social without being pretentious." The first official customer of the restaurant was Mr. Henderson, who had insisted on arriving early to have the honor of ordering the first dish officially served at Roots and Branches. "I want the special grilled cheese sandwiches," he said, with a smile that lit up his entire face. "The same ones you used to make in my kitchen, but now in your own restaurant." The day unfolded like a perfectly executed dream. Dishes emerged from the kitchen with the precision of a well-rehearsed choreography. The servers attended to customers with the warmth Chloe had emphasized during weeks of training, and the restaurant's atmosphere vibrated with the energy of celebration she had envisioned from day one. Leo, dressed in a small chef's shirt that Eleanor had sewn especially for the occasion, was the unofficial star of the event. Customers lined up to take photos with him, and his presence transformed every table into a spontaneous family celebration. At the end of the first day, after serving more than 200 customers and receiving praise that exceeded her most optimistic expectations, Chloe sat at a table in the now empty restaurant with Leo in her arms, observing the space that had finally taken physical form after existing for so long only in her imagination. "We did it, my love," she whispered to Leo, who was playing with the little chef's apron he refused to take off. "Your mom officially has her own restaurant." In the stillness of that first night, surrounded by the persistent aroma of spices and the silent echo of cheerful conversations, Chloe felt a satisfaction that transcended professional achievement. She had created something that was more than a business. She had created a space where families could connect, where traditions could be passed down to new generations, and where she could live her purpose daily of nourishing not only bodies, but also souls. The dream had fully bloomed, but Chloe knew this was just the beginning of an even greater story waiting to be written. October 2019 arrived with that sweet nostalgia characterizing autumn in the American Midwest, when the leaves of the colonial trees begin to change color, and the air fills with aromas that evoke memories of ancestral celebrations. For Chloe, October marked not only the 6th month of Roots and Branches' successful operation, but also the moment her personal story would take a turn none of her boldest visualizations had predicted. The restaurant had exceeded all expectations. Reservations filled weeks in advance. Reviews in specialized media had been universally positive, and most importantly for Chloe, it had become a true community hub where families of all socioeconomic levels felt equally welcome. Leo, now 2 years and 2 months old, had evolved into a charismatic personality whose presence illuminated every space he inhabited. His development had been extraordinary. The specialized therapies he had begun months ago had empowered skills that constantly surprised his therapists, and his natural ability to connect emotionally with people of all ages had proven to be one of the secret ingredients to the restaurant's success. That child has a special gift for making people feel important, Olivia Hayes observed during one of her periodic visits from New York. I've worked in restaurants for 20 years, and I've never seen a more effective ambassador than Leo. The cooking school on the 2nd floor had begun operations in August, offering classes ranging from basic culinary techniques to specialized courses in regional American gastronomy. But the program that had the greatest impact was the one Chloe had designed specifically for young people in socially vulnerable situations. Cuisine for Life, a 6-month program that combined culinary training with business skill development and emotional support. The first graduates of the program had found jobs in local restaurants, started their own small food businesses, or decided to continue their culinary education at more advanced institutions. Seeing these young people transform not only their skills, but also their confidence and perspective on the future had confirmed for Chloe that she was fulfilling the deepest purpose she had envisioned from the beginning. But it was during the 3rd week of October that she received a visit that would connect her prosperous present with a painful past in a way she never would have imagined. She was in the kitchen supervising lunch preparation, while Leo played in his special area near the workstations, when one of the servers approached with an uncertain expression. "Chef Chloe, there's someone who wants to speak with you. They say it's very important but won't tell me what it's about." When she went out to the restaurant area, she found a woman of approximately 30, modestly dressed but with dignity, waiting by the entrance. Her face looked vaguely familiar, but Chloe couldn't place where she had seen her before. "Ms. Miller, I'm Sarah Davis. It was Mark's sister. The world seemed to stop. Chloe hadn't heard anything about Mark since her hospital visit months ago, when he had been struggling with heart problems related to stress and alcohol. "Sarah, how is Mark?" "He's better. Much better, in fact. He stopped drinking. He's getting therapy and—" Sarah paused as if gathering courage to continue. "He's working as a cook at a community kitchen. He says it's the most satisfying thing he's done in years." "I'm glad to hear that. But I didn't come to talk about Mark. I came to talk about us, about our family." Sarah looked around the restaurant, observing the photographs of women cooks on the walls and the decor celebrating American culinary culture. "Could we talk privately? There's something you need to know, something Mark asked me to tell you." They went to the small conference room on the 2nd floor, where Chloe occasionally met with suppliers or gave interviews to journalists. Sarah sat on the edge of her chair, clearly nervous, while Chloe waited with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Ms. Miller. Chloe, Mark is your brother." The words fell into the room like stones in deep water, creating ripples of shock that took several seconds to be fully processed. "What? My father?" "Our father, William Miller, had a relationship with our mother about 30 years ago. Mark was born from that relationship. Our mother never told your father about the pregnancy because he was already married to your mother." Chloe felt as if the floor had turned to liquid beneath her feet. "Are you sure?" "Completely sure. We have documents, photographs, letters our mother kept for years. Mark knew when he turned 18, but he decided not to contact his father's family because he didn't want to create problems." "But then, did he know who I was when he hired me at the restaurant?" "Not at first. He only realized after you had been working there for several months. Someone mentioned your full last name and your mother's name, and he made the connection." The implications of this revelation spread through Chloe's mind like seismic waves. Her dismissal had not just been about financial irregularities. Mark had been struggling with the guilt of stealing money from the restaurant, the fear of being discovered, and the additional emotional complication of knowing he was hurting a sister he didn't know, but had come to professionally respect. "That's why he was so devastated when I confronted him at the bar," she murmured, recalling the conversation where he had seemed to be carrying more guilt than the apparent circumstances justified. "Exactly. Mark told me that when you visited him in the hospital, when you offered him forgiveness without knowing you were siblings, it was the moment that changed his life. He decided that if you could be so generous with someone who had hurt you, he needed to find a way to live that honored, that generosity." That night, after closing the restaurant and putting Leo to bed, Chloe sat in her apartment processing this new reality. She had a brother who had been present in her life for months, without either of them knowing of their family connection. A brother who had deeply hurt her, but whose actions were now understood in the context of a much more complex internal struggle. Over the next few days, Sarah returned several times to share more details about Mark's family and to show photographs and documents that confirmed the relationship. Mark had wanted to come personally, but feared his presence would be too painful or disruptive for Chloe. "He wants to meet Leo," Sarah confessed during one of these visits. "He says he wants to be the kind of uncle he never had as a child." The decision to allow Mark to meet Leo was not easy. It required long conversations with Eleanor, with Arthur, and much personal reflection on forgiveness, family, and the possibility of building healthy relationships on foundations that had begun with pain. The meeting took place in Maplewood Central Park on a November afternoon, when the leaves of the trees created a golden carpet under the soft autumn sun. Mark arrived nervous, cleanly dressed, and carrying a gift for Leo, a set of toy kitchen utensils made of wood by a local artisan. "Hello, Chloe," he said simply, and in those two words, she could hear years of regret, hope, and the desperate desire to start over. "Hello, Mark." Leo, with that extraordinary intuition he had demonstrated since he was a baby, immediately approached Mark without fear or hesitation. When Mark knelt to be at his height, Leo studied him with that serious concentration he used to evaluate new people. "Do you know how to cook?" Leo asked, in that direct way that characterized all his social interactions. "Yes, little one. I love to cook." "Mommy cooks really good too. You can come eat at our restaurant." The simplicity and generosity of Leo's invitation broke the tension that had been present from the moment Mark arrived. For the first time in years, the siblings looked directly into each other's eyes and saw the possibility of building something new on the fragments of what had been broken. Over the next few hours, While Leo played in the park and explored his new kitchen toys, Mark and Chloe talked about the past, the present, and the possibility of a future where they could be family in ways neither had imagined possible. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately," Mark told her as they prepared to leave. "But I hope you'll allow me to prove to you, through my actions over the next few years, that I can be the brother you should have had from the beginning." That night, while Leo played with his new kitchen toys and spoke excitedly about the man who knows how to cook, Chloe reflected on the extraordinary nature of her story. It had begun with a public humiliation that had seemed like the end of everything. Now, almost 3 years later, she had found not only professional purpose and financial stability, but also family she didn't know she had. The circle had not only closed, it had expanded to include possibilities that none of her boldest visualizations had contemplated. And at the center of it all was Leo, the teacher who had come to teach her that love, patience, and open-heartedness could transform even the most complicated situations into unexpected blessings. December 2024 arrived in Maplewood with that particular magic that transformed the colonial city into a fairy tale setting, where Christmas lights reflected on the cobblestone streets wet from winter rains, and the aroma of hot cider mingled with the joyful sound of holiday gatherings celebrating in every neighborhood. For Chloe, December marked not only the 8th anniversary of that transformative afternoon when she lost her job at Grandma's Kitchen, but also the culmination of a decade of growth that had surpassed even her boldest dreams. The building that now housed both the Roots and Branches restaurant and the Culinary Training Center had undergone significant expansion in recent years. The popularity of the Cuisine for Life program had required additional spaces, and Arthur had acquired the adjacent building to create a complete culinary complex that included specialized classrooms, a culinary library, an organic herb garden, and workshops where young graduates could develop their own entrepreneurial projects. Leo, now 7 years old, had grown into a charismatic personality whose presence illuminated every space he inhabited. His development had been extraordinary. Early therapies had enhanced skills that constantly surprised educators and specialists, and his natural ability to connect with people of all ages had made him the center's unofficial ambassador. He spoke 3 languages: English, Spanish, and a few phrases in the Native American dialect he had learned from recordings of his great-great-grandmother. He played the guitar with a musicality that brought tears to eyes and possessed an intuitive understanding of gastronomy that impressed professional chefs. "This child understands flavors in a way that goes beyond technique," Olivia Hayes had observed during her most recent visit. "It's as if he can feel the emotions that cooks put into the food." On the morning of December 15th, exactly 8 years after her transformative dismissal, Chloe woke up early to prepare for the most significant ceremony in the center's history: the official inauguration of the Culinary Rehabilitation Program for individuals in social reintegration, a revolutionary project that would offer gastronomic training and comprehensive support to individuals seeking to rebuild their lives after difficult experiences. The program had been directly inspired by Mark's transformation, who over the past 5 years had demonstrated that a true second chance, combined with genuine purpose, could create miracles of redemption. His work in the community kitchen had evolved into coordinating several food programs for vulnerable individuals, and his personal experience had made him an invaluable mentor for others struggling with addictions or legal issues. "Good morning, my love," Chloe murmured, finding Leo already awake and dressed in his small chef's uniform that he insisted on wearing for all special occasions at the center. "Good morning, Mom. Is Uncle Mark coming early today to help with the ceremony?" "Yes, he'll be here in an hour to help get everything ready." "Perfect. I want to show him the new tamale recipe I learned with Ms. Eleanor." The relationship between Leo and Mark had blossomed in ways that had surprised the whole family. Mark had proven to be a patient, creative, and deeply dedicated uncle, while Leo had responded with the unconditional affection that characterized all his important relationships. Their connection had been particularly special in the kitchen, where they worked together as a naturally synchronized team. By 9 a.m., the center began to fill with guests representing all aspects of the community Chloe had built over these years. Graduates of the original program, who now ran their own successful businesses, families who had found a space for celebration and connection in the restaurant, government officials who had supported the center's social initiatives, and food journalists who would document the expansion of a model that was being replicated in other American cities. Mr. Henderson, now 70 years old, but with a spirit that seemed to rejuvenate every time he visited the center, arrived dressed in his best suit and accompanied by a delegation of small gastronomic entrepreneurs who had found inspiration in Chloe's story. "Young lady," Mr. Henderson told her, hugging her with the strength of someone who had seen a miracle grow. "Your great-grandmother would be so proud wherever she is. Look at everything you built from that sadness that seemed like the end of the world." Eleanor, now officially retired but volunteering at the center 3 days a week, moved through the space like an experienced hostess, making sure every guest felt welcome and knew the full story of the project. "My daughter didn't just open a restaurant," she proudly explained to anyone willing to listen. "She created a place where people discover they can be better than they ever imagined." The most emotional moment of the morning came when Arthur, now 57 with graying hair that gave him an air of quiet distinction, approached Chloe with a surprise he had been planning for months. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an elegant envelope with the center's logo printed on handmade paper. Inside the envelope, Chloe found legal documents transferring full ownership of the building and all the center's assets to her name, effective immediately. "Arthur, I can't accept this. It's not a gift, it's a recognition. You've shown over these years that you can manage this operation better than I ever could. And more importantly, you've shown that your vision for this place goes far beyond what I had imagined when we started. The money I invested has been recovered many times over through the impact you've created in this community. This place no longer needs an investor. It needs a visionary leader, and that person is you," he added with a melancholic smile. "Besides, I'm sure this is exactly the kind of project that would have made Emily proud, wherever she is now." The official ceremony began at noon, with Leo cutting the inaugural ribbon of the new program, while television cameras documented the moment. His speech, rehearsed for weeks, but delivered with a naturalness that enchanted the audience, perfectly summarized the spirit of the project. "My mom says the kitchen is where people learn they can make beautiful things with their hands, even when their hearts have been sad. This place is for everyone to learn that you can always start over, and that yummy food comes from hearts that are healing." The first group of students in the new program included 12 people with diverse stories, but connected by the common desire to rebuild their lives on more solid foundations. Among them was Maria, a 40-year-old woman who had struggled with addiction for a decade and now sought stability through honest work. Charles, a 25-year-old man who had made legal mistakes in his adolescence and wanted to prove he had matured. And Hope, another Hope, the third in Chloe's life. A 35-year-old single mother who needed skills that would allow her to support her family with dignity. "Welcome to your new family," Chloe told them during the orientation session that marked the official start of their studies. "Here you will learn to cook, but more importantly, you will remember who you really are when you stop carrying shame about your past and start building pride about your future." During the afternoon, while the local radio program interviewed participants and documented the center's operation, Chloe slipped away for a few minutes to the herb garden that had been planted on the building's rooftop. It was her personal refuge, a space where she could reflect and connect with the quiet energy she needed to manage the multiple responsibilities of her life. Leo found her there, as he always seemed to know when she needed silent company. "Mommy, are you happy?" "Very happy, my love. Are you?" "Yes. I like it when we help people feel important. You know what I've learned, Leo?" "What?" "That the most beautiful things in life come after the most difficult moments, like flowers that grow stronger after winter." That night, after the last guest had left, and the center had returned to its nocturnal stillness, Chloe sat in her office, reviewing congratulatory letters that had arrived from all over the United States and some Latin American countries, where they were replicating the center's model. One letter in particular caught her attention. It came from Olivia Hayes in New York. "Dear Chloe, I have followed your progress over these years with constantly growing admiration. What you have built transcends gastronomy. You have created a model of community development that demonstrates how a person with clear vision and an open heart can transform not only their own life, but the lives of hundreds of people. Your story is being taught in culinary schools as an example of successful social entrepreneurship, and I have personally implemented several of your concepts in my operations here in New York. More importantly, your example has inspired me to establish my own Second Chance program. Thank you for demonstrating that true success is measured by how much good you can create in the world." Reading those words, Chloe felt a satisfaction that transcended all the professional accolades she had received. Her work was inspiring replicas and adaptations that would multiply its impact far beyond what she could achieve working alone. Near midnight, as she finished organizing documents for the next day, she found in the bottom of a drawer the worn notebook where she had begun to jot down recipes and reflections during her first days working at the Tasty Corner Diner. Opening it to the first page, she found a note she had written during one of those sleepless nights when the future seemed impossibly uncertain. "If this doesn't work out, at least I'll know I tried with all my heart. And if it does work out, I promise to use the success to help other people who are going through what I'm going through now." She smiled, remembering the woman who had written those words. Scared, desperate, but sustained by a determination she didn't know she possessed. That woman couldn't have imagined the future she now lived, but she had planted the seeds that had grown into this garden of new beginnings. On the last page of the notebook, she wrote a final reflection that summarized everything she had learned during her extraordinary journey of transformation. True purpose is not found. It is built day by day through decisions that honor both our gifts and our responsibilities to others. Dignity cannot be taken away. It can only be surrendered. And the most powerful love is that which teaches us to see beautiful possibilities in places where others only see problems. My son taught me that differences enrich rather than limit. My family taught me that forgiveness frees both the forgiver and the forgiven. My community taught me that shared success is the only success worth pursuing. And life taught me that sometimes the most painful ending is simply the most beautiful beginning, waiting to be discovered. As she closed the notebook and turned off the lights of the center, Chloe walked slowly through the spaces that had been transformed from an impossible dream into a prosperous reality. In the main kitchen, she could still feel the echo of all the laughter, conversations, and moments of discovery that had occurred there. As she left the building into the starry Maplewood night, she paused for a moment to observe the bronze plaque they had installed next to the main entrance. The Roots and Branches Culinary Training Center, founded by Chloe Miller in 2019, where traditions are honored, talents are discovered, and dreams are cultivated, dedicated to all the grandmothers, who taught that the kitchen is the heart of the home and the laboratory of love. When as she walked back to her apartment, along the cobblestone streets that had witnessed her entire transformation, Chloe felt the spiritual presence of her great-grandmother accompanying her, as if her teachings and wisdom continued to guide her from some eternal place where love transcends time and space. In the classrooms, she could visualize hundreds of students who had passed through those spaces to discover talents they didn't know they possessed. The circle had not only closed, it had expanded into an ascending spiral that would continue to grow for generations, bringing the taste of dignity, the strength of forgiveness, and the transformative magic of unconditional love to everyone fortunate enough to pass through that sacred place where dreams were slowly cooked into extraordinary realities. In the distance, the bells of the Maplewood clock tower struck 12, announcing the beginning of a new day full of infinite possibilities.